I am Stephanie Martinez, 38, and literally last week my rep as the family peacekeeper? Yeah, it totally backfired. The harmony I'd been holding together for 17 years, it blew up into a full-on family meltdown at my sister's pristine dining room. Vivian, my golden child sister, straight up demanded I let it go, and when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You just ruined us," she yelled, with our parents staring like I'd committed murder. But here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note, this story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now, back to the story. The Martinez family hierarchy was established long before Ruby was born. Vivian, 3 years my senior, was the achiever. The one with the business degree, the suburban mansion, and the husband who played golf with city councilmen. Me? I was the cautionary tale, the teen mom who threw away her potential by having Ruby at 21. Never mind that I'd worked double shifts at the hospital while finishing my nursing degree online. Never mind that I'd raised Ruby alone after her father vanished. In my family's eyes, I was forever frozen as the disappointment. "Stephanie's doing fine," my mother would tell relatives at gatherings, her voice dropping on that last word like she was describing a terminal diagnosis. Meanwhile, Vivian's every achievement, her daughter Emma's B+ average, her husband's promotion, even her new kitchen backsplash, warranted a full presentation. I learned to navigate these waters carefully, show up to family dinners, smile through the backhanded compliments. "Ruby's so pretty, at least she has that going for her. Single mothers have it so hard, bless your heart." Maybe community college would be more realistic for Ruby's situation. What they didn't know was that Ruby had inherited something neither Vivian nor Emma possessed. A fierce, quiet brilliance that burned steady even when no one was watching. While they dismissed her potential, she was in her room solving calculus problems for fun, reading medical journals, teaching herself coding. She didn't need their approval. She had mine. And more importantly, she had her own. But last week, when I walked into Vivian's house for what was supposed to be a casual family dinner, I carried a secret that would shatter their carefully constructed narrative. Ruby's full-ride scholarship to Johns Hopkins, the one she'd earned through sheer determination, had been mysteriously withdrawn, and I'd just discovered exactly who was behind it. My hands trembled as I set down the pasta salad I'd brought, the evidence burning in my phone like a live coal. 17 years of being dismissed, overlooked, and patronized had led to this moment. They'd finally crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They'd gone after my daughter's future. The pasta salad wasn't even homemade. I'd grabbed it from the deli counter after my 12-hour shift, but I knew Vivian would serve it in her crystal bowl, and no one would know the difference. That's how invisible I'd become in this family. Even my contributions disappeared into someone else's presentation. As I watched my mother fuss over Vivian's new chandelier, my mind drifted to a family dinner 5 years ago. Ruby had just won the state science fair with her project on early cancer detection markers. She'd spent months researching, staying up past midnight to perfect her presentation. I'd driven her to the university library every weekend, packed dinners so she could work through mealtimes, proofread her paper until my eyes burned. The night of her win, I'd rushed to my parents' house, bursting with pride. Ruby clutched her trophy, her face glowing with accomplishment. But we'd barely made it through the door when Vivian announced Emma had made the JV cheerleading squad. "Oh, how wonderful!" my mother had gushed, pulling Emma into a hug. "Gerald, get the camera! Our granddaughter a cheerleader!" For the next hour, Emma demonstrated cheers in the living room while everyone applauded. Ruby's trophy sat forgotten on the entry table, slowly being buried under coats and purses. When Ruby finally mentioned her science fair win during dinner, my father had nodded absently. "That's nice, dear. Pass the potatoes?" I'd watched Ruby's shoulders slump, watched her push food around her plate. Later, I found her crying in the bathroom. "Why don't they care, Mom?" she'd asked, her voice breaking. "I worked so hard." "They care," I'd lied, holding her tight. "They just show it differently." But that was the night I stopped making excuses for them. That was the night I realized my family's love came with conditions I'd never meet. Teen pregnancy had branded me forever in their eyes. It didn't matter that I'd become head nurse in the pediatric ward. It didn't matter that I'd raised Ruby alone while building a career. It didn't matter that Ruby was extraordinary. At every gathering since, the pattern repeated. Emma's participation trophies warranted lengthy toasts. Ruby's academic achievements earned polite nods. When Ruby scored in the 99th percentile on her PSATs, Vivian chose that moment to announce her kitchen renovation. When Ruby was selected for the National Honor Society, my parents spent the evening discussing Emma's prom dress options. "You're too sensitive," my mother would say when I occasionally pushed back. "We love both girls equally. You're imagining favoritism." But numbers don't lie. I'd started keeping track in my phone. Vivian's family appeared in 847 photos on my mother's Facebook. Ruby and I appeared in 23. My parents had attended every one of Emma's recitals, games, and award ceremonies. They'd made it to exactly 2 of Ruby's events, her kindergarten graduation and her 8th grade promotion, both only because Vivian had guilt-tripped them into going. The worst part? Ruby had stopped expecting anything else. She'd learned to celebrate her victories quietly, sharing them only with me. She'd learned to armor herself against their indifference. She'd learned that in the Martinez family, some grandchildren mattered more than others. Standing in Vivian's kitchen now, watching my mother photograph Emma's latest cheerleading uniform from multiple angles, while Ruby's full-ride scholarship lay in ruins, I felt 17 years of suppressed rage crystallizing into something harder. Something decisive. The secret began 14 months ago, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Ruby had come home from school, her backpack heavy with college brochures she'd collected from the guidance counselor. She spread them across our kitchen table. Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, each glossy pamphlet representing an impossible dream given our financial situation. "Mom," she'd said quietly, tracing the Johns Hopkins logo with her finger, "I know we can't afford these, but what if I could get a full ride?" I'd sat down across from her, seeing the determination in her eyes that reminded me of myself at 17, before life had knocked me sideways. "Then we make it happen," I'd told her. "Whatever it takes." That night, Ruby created a study schedule that would have broken most adults. Up at 5 a.m. for 2 hours of SAT prep before school. Lunch periods spent in the library practicing essay prompts. After school, she'd volunteer at the hospital where I worked, building her resume while I finished my shifts. Then home for dinner, homework, and 3 more hours of test prep until midnight. I became her secret accomplice. I'd sneak SAT prep books home from the bookstore, photographing pages with my phone before returning them. I'd pack protein bars and fruit for her late-night study sessions. On weekends, I'd drive her to the public library, 3 towns over, where she could take free practice tests without running into anyone we knew. The secrecy was crucial. If Vivian knew Ruby was aiming for top-tier schools, she'd either mock the ambition or, worse, push Emma to compete. We couldn't afford that distraction. So we crafted cover stories. Ruby was working on a school project during family gatherings. Her weekend library trips were hanging out with friends. The dark circles under her eyes were from staying up watching Netflix. I watched my daughter transform. Not just academically, though her practice scores climbed steadily from 1,200 to 1,400 to 1,500, but in her sense of self. She'd found her purpose, and it had nothing to do with the Martinez family's judgment. The night before her SAT, I found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by erasers and number 2 pencils, hands shaking slightly. "What if I mess up?" she'd whispered. "What if all this was for nothing?" I'd pulled her into my arms, feeling how thin she'd gotten from stress. "You've already won," I'd told her. "You've proven you can outwork anyone. Tomorrow's just showing the world what I already know." She took the test at a high school 2 hours away to avoid running into family friends. I spent those 4 hours in the parking lot, praying to every deity I could name. When she finally emerged, she looked drained but oddly peaceful. "I did it," she said simply. "Whatever happens, I left it all in there." 3 weeks later, the scores arrived. I was at work when Ruby called, sobbing so hard I initially thought something terrible had happened. "Mom," she gasped, 1600. I got a perfect score. I locked myself in a supply closet and cried too. My baby, my brilliant baby who'd been dismissed and overlooked her entire life, had just achieved something Emma couldn't buy with all of Vivian's money and connections. The scholarship letters started arriving 2 months later. Ruby had applied everywhere, casting a wide net. But when the Johns Hopkins envelope came, thick, official, promising, we opened it together with trembling hands. Full ride, all 4 years. Academic scholarship for exceptional promise in pre-medical studies. We danced in our tiny apartment kitchen, laughing and crying simultaneously. But even in that joy, we knew to keep quiet. This was our secret, our victory, our future that didn't require the Martinez family's approval or validation. 6 weeks had passed since Ruby received her acceptance letter. We'd paid the enrollment deposit using my emergency fund, submitted her housing forms, even bought a Johns Hopkins sweatshirt that she wore to bed some nights. The official scholarship award letter was supposed to arrive by mid-May, giving us time to finalize everything before graduation. But May 15th came and went. Then May 20th. By May 25th, with graduation next week and the family reunion dinner tonight, anxiety had replaced our celebration. Ruby checked the mail obsessively, refreshed her email every few minutes, called the admissions office daily only to be told to wait a bit longer. "Maybe it's just delayed," Ruby said that morning, stirring her cereal without eating. The admissions office said sometimes the financial aid letters come separately. I nodded, but something felt wrong. In 17 years of single motherhood, I'd developed a sixth sense for trouble, and it was screaming now. "Baby, why don't you email your admissions counselor directly? The one who interviewed you?" "Miss Patterson? I did yesterday." Ruby pulled up her phone. She hasn't responded yet, which is weird. She usually writes back within hours. I was tying my scrubs when my phone buzzed. "Vivian." "Of course. Don't forget dinner tonight. 7 sharp, I'm making my famous lasagna." Her famous lasagna. Store-bought sauce doctored with dried herbs, but she'd never admit it. I stared at the text, feeling the familiar weight of obligation. These monthly dinners were mandatory in the Martinez family, as essential as breathing to my mother. "Do we have to go?" Ruby asked, reading my expression. I wanted to try calling Johns Hopkins again. "We'll make it quick," I promised. "Show our faces, eat fast, leave early. Besides, if we skip, your grandmother will call hourly until we show up." Ruby managed a small smile. "Remember last time we missed dinner? She sent Uncle Carlos to check if we were dead." That afternoon at the hospital dragged endlessly. Between patients, I found myself checking my phone, hoping for some update from the university. Nothing. By the time my shift ended, a cold dread had settled in my stomach. I found Ruby in her room when I got home, surrounded by paperwork. "I called again," she said without looking up. "They transferred me 3 times, then said the scholarship committee would review my status and get back to me." "Mom, what does that mean? Review what status?" "I don't know, baby." I sat on her bed, noticing she'd been crying. "But we'll figure it out, we always do." She finally met my eyes. What if something went wrong? What if they made a mistake, and I don't actually have the scholarship? What if... Stop. I pulled her close. "You earned that scholarship fair and square. Perfect SAT, 4.8 GPA, those incredible essays. If there's a mix-up, we'll fix it." We dressed for dinner in silence. Ruby wore the sundress my mother had bought her last Christmas, the only gift from them she actually liked. I chose my usual family dinner outfit, nice enough to avoid comments, plain enough to stay invisible. As we drove to Vivian's house, Ruby stared out the window. "You know what's funny?" she said quietly. "Part of me wanted to tell them tonight, about Johns Hopkins, about the scholarship. I had this stupid fantasy where they'd actually be proud." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "They should be proud, their loss if they're not." But as we pulled into Vivian's driveway, behind my parents' Lexus and Uncle Carlos's truck, that cold dread intensified. Something was waiting for us in that house, something that would explain the missing letter, the administrative runaround, the growing silence from Johns Hopkins. I just didn't know yet that the explanation was sitting at Vivian's dining table, wearing a satisfied smile and my mother's pearl necklace. Vivian's foyer smelled like garlic and expensive candles, the same suffocating combination that had greeted me for years. Emma bounded over immediately, her cheerleading ponytail swinging. "Aunt Steph, Ruby, guess what? I just got accepted to State University. Early admission. Congratulations, Ruby said politely, though I caught the tightness in her voice. State University, where Emma could party for 4 years on Vivian's dime, while Ruby had worked herself to exhaustion for Johns Hopkins. Isn't it wonderful? My mother swept in, champagne glass already in hand. Our Emma, a college girl! Vivian's already planning her dorm room. The dining room was set with Vivian's wedding china. The table centerpiece, an elaborate arrangement of roses, that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. Uncle Carlos was already seated, scrolling through his phone, while my father nursed a beer and watched golf highlights on the kitchen TV. Ruby, sweetie, you're looking thin, my mother observed, her standard greeting for my daughter. Are you eating enough? Stephanie, you need to make sure she's eating. She's fine, Mom, I said, guiding Ruby to our usual seats, the ones farthest from the head of the table naturally. Vivian emerged from the kitchen, carrying her famous lasagna like a trophy. Her smile seemed brighter than usual, almost gleeful. Perfect timing. I was just telling Rick about Emma's acceptance, full admission to their business program. She'll follow in my footsteps. That's nice, I managed, noticing how Vivian's eyes kept flicking to Ruby. Something predatory in that gaze made my skin crawl. We'd barely started eating when Ruby's phone buzzed. She glanced at it automatically. We had a rule about phones during family dinner, but given the Johns Hopkins situation, I'd told her to keep checking. Her face went white. Excuse me, she whispered, standing abruptly. I need to use the bathroom. Ruby? I half rose, but she was already walking away, phone clutched in her hand. Teenagers, my mother sighed. Always so dramatic. Emma, tell us more about your orientation plans. But I wasn't listening to Emma's chatter. I was watching Vivian, who had relaxed back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just won a hand of poker. 5 minutes passed. 10. I excused myself and found Ruby in the powder room, sitting on the closed toilet lid, staring at her phone screen. Mom, she said, voice hollow. Johns Hopkins finally responded. They said they received an email from my account on May 10th, formally withdrawing my enrollment and declining the scholarship. The world tilted. What? Show me. She handed me her phone with trembling fingers. There it was, forwarded from the admissions office. An email from Ruby's address, sent May 10th at 2:47 a.m. Dear Admissions Committee, after careful consideration with my family, I have decided to decline my acceptance to Johns Hopkins University and the accompanying scholarship. Please release my spot to another deserving candidate. I will be pursuing opportunities closer to home. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, Ruby Martinez. I didn't write this, Ruby whispered. Mom, I was asleep at 2:47 a.m. on May 10th. We had that bio exam the next day, remember? I went to bed at 10. My mind raced. Who has your email password? Nobody. I mean, it's saved on my laptop, but... Her eyes widened. Oh my God, the Mother's Day brunch, remember? May 9th. Grandma insisted we come here after church. I remembered. Ruby had brought her laptop to work on an English paper. She'd left it in the living room when my mother had demanded we all take family photos in the garden. We'd been outside for at least an hour, posing and reposing while Vivian directed the photo shoot. Someone used my laptop, Ruby said, the pieces clicking together. Someone logged into my email and sent this. Mom, who would? But I already knew. The predatory smile, the gleeful energy. The way Vivian kept watching Ruby throughout dinner. Stay here, I told my daughter. Check your email login history. Screenshot everything. My hands weren't trembling anymore as I walked back to the dining room. They were perfectly steady, the way they got when I handled emergency codes at the hospital. I had 17 years of silence to break. I stood in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the warm light of the dining room. Everyone was exactly where I'd left them, Vivian cutting another piece of lasagna for Emma, my mother refilling wine glasses, my father half watching from his seat nearest the kitchen TV. Uncle Carlos had abandoned his phone to help himself to seconds. Everything all right? My mother asked, noticing me first. Where's Ruby? She's checking something on her laptop, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Vivian, can I talk to you for a moment privately? Can't it wait? Vivian waved her fork dismissively. We're in the middle of Emma's college planning discussion. No, I said. It can't wait. Something in my tone must have penetrated because the table went quiet. Even my father muted the golf tournament. Fine. Vivian stood with exaggerated patience, the way she did when accommodating my dramatics. Let's go to my office. I followed her down the hall to the study she'd converted from a spare bedroom, all white furniture and motivational quotes in gold frames. She settled behind her desk like a CEO preparing to fire an employee. What's this about, Stephanie? You're being very rude to our parents. I pulled out my phone, finding the screenshots Ruby had just sent me. May 10th. 2:47 a.m. Someone logged into Ruby's email account from an IP address registered to this house. Vivian's face didn't change, but her hands stilled on the desk. I don't know what you're talking about. They sent an email to Johns Hopkins, declining her enrollment and her full-ride scholarship. I stepped closer. The email was sent from your home network, Vivian, while we were all asleep after the Mother's Day dinner. That's ridiculous. How would I even know Ruby's password? You didn't need to, I said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Her laptop autosaves passwords. She left it in your living room during the family photos. You had over an hour. You're being paranoid. But Vivian's voice had gone up half an octave, her tell since childhood. Ruby's checking her email login history right now. Want to guess what she'll find? Vivian stood abruptly. Even if, and I'm not saying this happened, but even if someone did access her email, you can't prove it was me. Could have been Rick or Emma or... It was you. I kept my voice level, though rage was building in my chest. But what I can't figure out is why. Why would you sabotage a 17-year-old girl's future? Your own niece? For a moment, Vivian's mask slipped. You really don't get it, do you? Ruby applying to Johns Hopkins? That's not realistic for someone like her. I was doing you both a favor, saving you from disappointment when she inevitably failed. She had a full scholarship. She earned it with a perfect SAT score. Perfect? Vivian laughed, ugly and sharp. Right. Like Ruby could score higher than Emma. Emma, who's had tutors since middle school. She did, though. 1600. Want to see the score report? Vivian's face went red, then white. That's not... How did she... By working harder than Emma ever has, by being brilliant, by deserving that scholarship. I leaned forward. But you couldn't stand that, could you? Couldn't stand that my daughter, the teen mom's kid, the one you all wrote off, outshone yours. I don't have to listen to this. Vivian moved toward the door, but I blocked her path. Did Mom and Dad know? Know what? But again, that telltale pitch change. Ruby's laptop password is saved in Mom's important information notebook, the one she keeps in her purse for emergencies. I saw her pull it out during dinner to write down Emma's student ID number. Vivian's silence was answer enough. They gave you her password, I said, feeling something inside me break. My own parents helped you steal my daughter's future. It wasn't stealing. Vivian's composure finally cracked. Emma needed that scholarship more. We have 3 kids, a mortgage, Rick's business isn't doing well. You have no idea the pressure we're under. Ruby could go to community college, work her way up like you did. But Emma, she's legacy. Your daughter deserves what she earns. I cut her off. Nothing more. The door to Vivian's office burst open before I could respond. Ruby stood there, laptop clutched against her chest, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, my mother hovered with Uncle Carlos, their expressions shifting from concern to guilt as they took in the scene. I have everything, Ruby said, her voice stronger than I expected. The login history shows access from this IP address. May 10th, 2:43 a.m. Someone spent 17 minutes in my account. Ruby, sweetheart, my mother started, reaching for her granddaughter. There must be some misunderstanding. Don't. Ruby stepped back, and I saw my quiet daughter transform into someone I'd never seen before. Someone who wouldn't be silenced. I heard you all. From the hallway. Every word. I pulled out my phone, swiping to the voice recorder I'd activated the moment I'd entered Vivian's office. The red numbers continued climbing. 432, 433, 434. You recorded this? Vivian's face went ashen. That's illegal. You can't. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state, I said calmly. But Texas, where Johns Hopkins will be filing their fraud report, is 1 party, and the FBI, who handles interstate wire fraud, definitely won't care about consent laws when investigating identity theft. FBI? My father appeared in the doorway, still holding his beer. What's going on, Vivian? Dad knew too. Ruby's voice was hollow. Didn't you, Grandpa? Grandma showed you my password from her notebook. You both helped Aunt Vivian steal my scholarship so Emma could have it. The silence stretched like a physical thing. My father's beer bottle slipped slightly in his grip, foam running over his fingers. Behind him, Emma peered around the corner, her perpetual smile finally gone. We were protecting the family, my mother said finally, lifting her chin with the self-righteousness I'd seen my whole life. Emma's been struggling. Her grades weren't good enough for scholarships, and Vivian and Rick are having financial troubles. Ruby's young, she can apply again. Protecting the family? I laughed, but it came out cracked. By destroying your granddaughter's future? She's dramatic, just like you've always been, Vivian interjected, finding her footing again. One scholarship doesn't destroy anything. There are other schools, other opportunities, but Emma only has this one chance. My daughter deserves. I worked every single day for 2 years, Ruby interrupted, her laptop shaking in her grip. 5 a.m. study sessions, no parties, no dating, no normal teenage life. I earned a perfect SAT score while you all told me I was aiming too high. And you just took it? We evened the playing field, Vivian said, and there it was, the phrase I'd been waiting for, now captured crystal clear on my recording. Life isn't fair, Ruby. Sometimes family means making hard choices. Emma needed this more than you did. You're smart, you'll figure something else out. But Emma, she needs the boost. She needs the opportunity. The boost? Ruby's voice cracked. She needs my opportunity. You wouldn't understand, my mother added, moving to stand beside Vivian. You don't have children yet. Someday, when you're a mother, you'll realize we did this from love. Equal opportunity isn't always fair. Emma's been at a disadvantage her whole life competing with you. I watched my daughter's face crumble at the word love, and something ancient and protective roared to life inside me. Emma's disadvantage, I said slowly, is that she's lazy, that she's been handed everything while Ruby worked for scraps of approval, that you've all spent so long propping her up she never learned to stand on her own. How dare you, Vivian started. I'm not done. I held up my phone, making sure they could all see the recording still running. You committed fraud, identity theft, wire fraud across state lines. You didn't even the playing field. You committed felonies. And you just confessed, on tape. The room erupted. Vivian lunged for my phone, but I'd spent years lifting patients and dodging flailing limbs in the pediatric ward. I sidestepped easily, keeping the device high and safe. Delete that recording right now, Vivian shrieked, her perfect composure shattered. This is family business. You don't bring outsiders into family business. Family? I backed toward Ruby, who stood frozen by the door. You lost the right to use that word the moment you touched my daughter's future. My father finally set down his beer, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been shame. Stephanie, be reasonable. We're not criminals. We're your parents. We did what we thought was best for everyone. Best for everyone? I pulled Ruby against my side, feeling her trembling. Or best for Emma, because I'm counting one granddaughter whose life you just tried to destroy. Nobody's destroyed. My mother's voice went shrill. Stop being so dramatic. We'll fix this. Vivian will call the school, explain there was a misunderstanding. And say what? I cut her off. That she accidentally broke into Ruby's email at 2:43 in the morning? That she accidentally impersonated a minor? That she accidentally committed wire fraud? Emma finally entered the room fully, her face blotchy with tears. Mom, what's happening? What did you do? For once, Vivian didn't rush to comfort her daughter. She was too busy calculating, her business major brain probably running through damage control scenario. We need to handle this as a family. Stephanie, what do you want? Money? An apology? We can work something out. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to face consequences. Real ones. The kind you can't buy your way out of or charm your way past. You're going to destroy our lives over one scholarship? Uncle Carlos finally spoke, his usual joviality replaced with disbelief. Vivian made a mistake. We all did. But sending family to prison? That's too far. Too far? Ruby's voice cut through the room like shattered glass. They stole my future and gave it to Emma. They watched me work myself sick for 2 years, knowing they'd take it away. They smiled at me during Sunday dinners, hugged me at Christmas, all while planning to destroy everything I'd earned. but reporting it is too far? Ruby, Misha. My father tried his gentle grandfather voice, the one he'd never really used with her before. You're young. You don't understand how hard things have been for Vivian and Rick. Emma's their oldest, their hope. And what am I? Ruby's voice broke. What have I ever been to any of you except the teen mom's kid? The mistake? The one who should be grateful for hand-me-downs in community college? The truth of it hung in the air like smoke. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. But for once, she had no platitudes, no dismissive comments, no way to minimize what they'd done. We're leaving, I announced, guiding Ruby toward the door. Don't contact us, don't come to the hospital, don't call, don't text, don't show up at our apartment. As far as I'm concerned, I have no family except my daughter. You can't mean that, my mother whispered. We're your parents. We raised you. I turned back one last time, meeting each of their eyes. You raised me to be invisible, to accept crumbs, to watch my daughter be treated as less than while staying quiet to keep the peace. But you made one mistake. You went after her directly, and that's something I'll never forgive. Stephanie, please. Vivian tried one more time. Think about what you're doing. Criminal charges? The scandal? It'll ruin Emma's reputation, her college career? Is that what you want? I smiled then, and I saw Vivian flinch at whatever she saw in my expression. Emma's reputation is your problem. My daughter's future is mine, and I choose her, every time. We left them standing in that perfect white office, with its motivational quotes about family and success, the recording still running in my hand, capturing every second of their stunned silence. The pediatric ward at Massachusetts General had always been my sanctuary, but that Monday morning it felt different. 3 days had passed since the dinner at Vivian's. 3 days since I'd filed police reports for identity theft, wire fraud, and impersonation of a minor. 3 days since I'd forwarded every shred of evidence to Johns Hopkins' legal department and admissions office. My colleagues noticed something had shifted. You look lighter, Dr. Chen observed during rounds. Like you've put down something heavy. If only she knew. I'd put down 17 years of obligatory silence. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother, the 43rd since Friday night. I deleted it without reading, just like the others. The voicemails had stopped after I'd blocked their numbers, but they'd found ways around it, borrowing phones, creating new emails, even sending a certified letter that I'd refused to sign for. Mom? Ruby's name appeared on my phone screen during my lunch break. Can you come home early today? I have something to show you. I found her in our living room, transformed into a makeshift classroom. Our coffee table was covered with SAT prep books, practice tests, and color-coded study guides. But the surprising part was the 3 teenagers sitting cross-legged on our floor, pencils in hand, watching Ruby work through a geometry problem on a whiteboard we definitely didn't own yesterday. Mom, this is Maria, Kevin, and Dante. Ruby introduced them as I stood frozen in the doorway. They're juniors at Madison High, the one in Roxbury? I knew Madison High. Their average SAT score was 400 points below the state average. Their college acceptance rate hovered around 30%. We met Ruby at the library, Maria explained, her voice shy but determined. She was returning SAT books, and I asked if they helped. When she told us she got a perfect score, she trailed off, looking at Ruby with something approaching awe. They can't afford test prep, Ruby said simply. So I offered to help. Mom, is it okay if we use the living room on Tuesdays and Thursdays? I watched my daughter explaining triangle congruence with the same intensity she'd once reserved for her own studies. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. While her cousin's world imploded, she was building something new. Of course it's okay, I managed through the tightness in my throat. The doorbell rang before Ruby could respond. We never had unexpected visitors, a benefit of keeping a small circle. I peered through the peephole to find Emma standing on our doorstep, mascara streaking her face. I'll handle this, I told Ruby, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. Emma looked smaller without her cheerleading uniform and perfect ponytail. Aunt Steph, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Mom did until after you left. She told me Ruby decided not to go, that she gave me her spot because family helps family. And you believed that? I kept my voice neutral, though part of me ached for this girl who'd been failed by her parents in a different way than Ruby had. Emma's face crumpled. Maybe I wanted to. It seemed too good to be true, but Mom said Ruby was being generous, that she wanted to stay close to you. She took a shuddering breath. Johns Hopkins called today. They're rescinding my acceptance. They said I was part of a fraudulent application. You weren't part of it, I said carefully. But you benefited from it. There's a difference, but both have consequences. Mom's been served papers, criminal charges, Dad moved to a hotel, and Grandma and Grandpa, the whole church knows. Someone posted about it in the community Facebook group. Emma wiped her nose with her sleeve, a gesture Vivian would have hated. I have to tell you something. Mom's planning to say Ruby gave her the password. That it was all a misunderstanding, that Ruby asked her to withdraw the application but changed her mind. My blood went cold. She's gonna lie to the police? She's desperate. She keeps saying family protects family, that Ruby will understand it's for the greater good. Emma met my eyes. I recorded her coaching me on what to say, on my phone. I couldn't do it. I couldn't lie about Ruby, not after everything. Inside, I heard Ruby's voice rising and falling in patient explanation, followed by her students' laughter. My daughter, building others up, even as her own family had tried to tear her down. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. Emma shifted nervously. Could you maybe tell Ruby I'm sorry? That I wish I'd been better? Tell her yourself, I said. But not today, not while she's teaching. She's busy building the future she should have had all along. The next 2 weeks became a masterclass in boundary setting. I'd spent 17 years bending to keep the family peace, but now I was constructing walls with the precision of a cardiac surgeon. Every boundary had to be airtight, every loophole closed. The restraining order was step 1. My lawyer, Janet Chen, a friend from the hospital whose daughter Ruby had tutored, filed it within 48 hours of Emma's warning. Harassment, attempted witness tampering, and credible threats to commit perjury, she'd listed, her voice clinical. The judge will grant this. Your mother showing up at your workplace sealed it. She was right. My mother had appeared in the pediatric ward on Tuesday, causing a scene that required security intervention. You're destroying our family, she'd wailed as 2 guards escorted her out. Over 1 scholarship, 1 opportunity. Family forgives Stephanie. But I was done forgiving at my daughter's expense. Step 2 was securing our digital lives. Ruby and I spent an entire evening changing every password, enabling 2-factor authentication, and creating new email accounts. We even changed our Wi-Fi network name from Martinez Home to New Beginnings 2024. Small acts of reclamation. Should I make my social media private too? Ruby asked, scrolling through her Instagram. Everything, I confirmed, and remove any family members who might give them information. She paused at Emma's profile. They'd never been close, but there were photos from Christmas dinners, birthday parties, the ordinary documentation of cousins who saw each other monthly. Ruby's finger hovered over the remove follower button. It's okay to grieve it, I told her gently. Even toxic relationships leave ghosts. Step 3 was the hardest, informing our extended network. The Massachusetts-Puerto Rican community was tight-knit, and news traveled fast. I'd already received calls from distant cousins, family friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some supported us, others didn't. You don't turn family over to the police, Cousin Miguel had said during one particularly difficult call. Handle it internally, that's how we do things. That's how we enable abuse, I'd countered. That's how we teach our children their pain matters less than the family's reputation. The call ended with him hanging up, another relationship severed. But for every Miguel, there was a surprise ally, like Mrs. Delgado from church who'd pulled me aside after Mass. My husband's nephew did the same to their daughter, she'd whispered. Stole her identity, ruined her credit. They stayed quiet to keep peace. 20 years later she still struggles while he prospers. You're doing right, mija. The most unexpected boundary came from Ruby herself. She'd been accepted to a summer program at MIT for rising seniors, something she'd applied to before the scholarship saga. When the acceptance arrived, she'd made a decision without consulting me. I want to go, she announced over dinner, but I'm listing Dr. Chen as my emergency contact instead of you. I must have looked hurt because she quickly explained. It's not about you, Mom, it's protection. If they can't reach you in emergencies, they can't manipulate you. They can't use my safety to force contact. Dr. Chen already agreed. My 17-year-old daughter was teaching me advanced boundary setting. She'd thought 3 steps ahead, anticipating manipulation tactics I hadn't even considered. "You're brilliant," I told her. "And I'm so proud of who you're becoming." That night, I found a yellow legal pad and started writing. Not a letter, I was done communicating with them, but a list. Every boundary I needed to maintain, every protection we required, every step toward the life we deserved. At the top I wrote, the new rules of engagement. Rule number 1, no exceptions for holidays. Rule number 2, all communication through lawyers. Rule number 3, Ruby's accomplishments are not family news. Rule number 4, our address remains private. Rule number 5, we define family now. The list grew to 3 pages. With each rule, I felt the invisible chains of 17 years loosening. We weren't just surviving their betrayal. We were architecting a completely different life. One built on truth, merit, and chosen family. One where Ruby's light would never be dimmed to make others comfortable. One where boundaries weren't walls keeping love out, but foundations keeping us safe. The Stephanie Martinez Foundation for Academic Excellence wasn't supposed to exist. It started as a bitter joke 3 weeks after the police reports, when Ruby and I were eating Chinese takeout on the living room floor, surrounded by legal documents and university correspondence. "Maybe we should start a scholarship fund," Ruby had said, stabbing at her lo mein. "The Watch Out for Your Own Family Scholarship. $5,000 for any kid whose relatives tried to sabotage their future." I'd laughed, the first real laugh since that horrible dinner. We'd go broke, too many qualified applicants. But the seed was planted. That night I couldn't sleep thinking about all the Rubies out there, the brilliant kids dismissed by their own families, the ones told they were aiming too high, dreaming too big, wanting too much, the ones whose light threatened someone else's comfort. I started small, a GoFundMe that Janet helped me write, telling our story without naming names, though anyone in our community knew exactly who the close family members were. The goal was modest, $10,000 to help Ruby's 3 tutoring students pay for SAT registration and prep materials. Within 24 hours, we'd raised $50,000. The comments section became a testament to stolen dreams. Story after story of family betrayal, of brilliance dimmed, futures derailed by those who should have been champions. A girl whose mother hid her acceptance letters. A boy whose uncle convinced him he wasn't college material so his own son would look better. Dozens of Rubies, all seeking what we'd found, the courage to reclaim their light. "Mom," Ruby said, scrolling through the donations. "Dr. Sullivan gave $5,000. Look at her note." I leaned over to read, "For Ruby, who tutored my daughter in chemistry and refused payment. For Stephanie, who held my hand through my son's leukemia treatment. For every child whose family failed to see their light. This foundation will change lives." By the end of the week, we'd hit $200,000. Local news picked up the story, then regional, then national. Mother and daughter turned family betrayal into beacon of hope, ran in the Globe. The reporter had been kind, focusing on our future rather than dwelling on the ugly past. But the real transformation came when established foundations started calling. The Patterson Foundation, known for supporting first-generation college students, offered to match our funds and provide administrative support. The Massachusetts Education Trust wanted to partner. Suddenly, our bitter joke had structure, legitimacy, a board of directors. "We need to be clear about our mission," the Patterson Foundation's director, Mrs. Williams, said during our first official meeting. "What makes your foundation different?" Ruby spoke before I could. "We fund kids whose biggest obstacle to success is their own family, the ones who need protection, not just money. We provide legal advocacy if needed, counseling support, safe housing during breaks if home isn't safe. We don't just write checks. We build shields." Mrs. Williams smiled. "That's powerful, and needed. How do you envision selecting recipients?" "Essays," I said, "but not about overcoming adversity. About what they've built despite it. Show us your light, not your darkness. Tell us what you'll create, not what was done to you." The first scholarship cycle we funded 23 students. Ruby insisted on reading every application, often crying over stories that echoed her own. Maria, one of her tutoring students, won a full ride to UMass Boston. Her essay about teaching her younger siblings math while her parents worked 3 jobs had reduced our entire board to tears. "You know what's beautiful?" Ruby said after our first award ceremony. "Grandma's sitting at home, reading about this in the paper. Reading about kids we're helping succeed. Kids she would have dismissed just like she dismissed me, and she can't claim any part of it." The foundation's name carried weight now. Universities reached out, wanting to partner. Counselors recommended students. Other betrayed achievers offered to mentor. We'd built something from our pain that our family couldn't touch, couldn't claim, couldn't destroy. The Martinez name, which my family had treated as their exclusive property, now meant something different entirely. It meant hope for the overlooked, protection for the vulnerable, proof that brilliance couldn't be dimmed by other people's insecurity. "We should name a scholarship after you," I told Ruby one evening as we reviewed applications for the next cycle. She shook her head. "Name it after us. The Stephanie and Ruby Martinez Scholarship for Unstoppable Light. For kids whose families tried to dim them, but couldn't." And that's exactly what we did. The tears started before Ruby even reached the podium. I sat in the 5th row of the high school auditorium, surrounded by the family we'd chosen. Dr. Chen and Janet on my left, Mrs. Delgado on my right, Maria and the other tutoring students behind us. Real family. The ones who showed up. Ruby adjusted the microphone, her valedictorian medal catching the stage lights. She looked so young in her cap and gown, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd walked through fire and decided to light candles with the flames. "They asked me to speak about success," she began, her voice clear and strong. "About achievement. About the future. But I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about integrity." The auditorium fell silent. Even the restless younger siblings stopped fidgeting. Integrity isn't just about being honest. It's about being whole, undivided. It's about knowing who you are when the people who should love you most try to break you into smaller, more convenient pieces. I gripped Dr. Chen's hand as Ruby continued. She didn't name names, she was too graceful for that, but her truth rang through every word. 2 months ago, I lost a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins. Not because I failed, not because I wasn't worthy, but because someone decided my dreams were too big for someone like me. Someone decided my success was a threat to be eliminated rather than a light to be celebrated. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Most knew the story by now, but hearing Ruby claim it publicly, refusing shame or silence, sent chills down my spine. That theft could have broken me. For a moment, it did. I questioned everything. My worth, my work, my right to want more than what others decided I deserved. But then I remembered something my mother taught me, not through words but through example. Our light doesn't come from other people's recognition, it comes from within. And no one, not family, not friends, not anyone, can steal what burns inside us. She looked directly at me then, and I didn't try to stop the tears. The Foundation for Academic Excellence we started has already helped 23 students find their light again. Students whose families told them to dream smaller, aim lower, want less. Students who were taught that their brilliance was a betrayal of some unspoken family code. We gave them more than money. We gave them permission to shine. Ruby paused, scanning the audience. I wondered if she was looking for them. Vivian, my parents, even Emma. But they weren't there. The restraining order aside, they'd lost the right to witness her triumph. I'm 18 years old, and I've learned that family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't staying quiet to keep an artificial peace. Family is the nurse who becomes your mother's best friend and your emergency contact. Family is the church lady who slips you SAT prep books when your own grandmother won't. Family is the lawyer who files restraining orders pro bono because she believes in your light. Family is everyone who sees your dream and says fly higher instead of come down. The applause started in our section and spread like wildfire. People stood one by one until the entire auditorium was on its feet. Ruby waited, patient and poised, until the noise died down. To my fellow graduates, I leave you with this. Your integrity, your wholeness is worth more than any opportunity that requires you to break yourself into smaller pieces. Your dreams are worth more than anyone's comfort with your limitations. And your light is worth protecting, nurturing, and sharing with a world that desperately needs it. She looked at me one last time. To my mother, who taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let anyone dim your child's light. Thank you. You didn't just save my future, you taught me to save myself. Ruby left the podium to thunderous applause, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about the shy 5-year-old who'd asked why Grandma loved Emma more. The 12-year-old who'd stopped mentioning her achievements at family dinners. The 17-year-old who'd worked in secret because she knew her ambition would be seen as an affront. That girl was gone. In her place stood a young woman who'd transformed betrayal into purpose, who'd built a foundation on the ashes of what should have broken her. As Ruby walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I thought about Vivian, probably watching the live stream from home, her own dreams of reputation in ruins, about my parents, learning that their conditional love had cost them everything worth having. About Emma, hopefully learning that real achievement couldn't be stolen, only earned. But mostly I thought about second chances. Ruby had hers, MIT had offered her a full ride after learning her story, and I had mine, the chance to be the mother I'd needed, the one who chose her child over everything else. True family had filled this auditorium, and that was the only graduation gift either of us needed. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Drop a comment below about a time when you had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting what mattered most. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family who crossed unforgivable lines? I know our story might seem extreme, but I've learned that family betrayal comes in many forms. Sometimes it's as dramatic as stolen scholarships and criminal charges. Sometimes it's quieter. The constant dismissal, the subtle sabotage, the expectation that you'll shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Whatever your story, remember this: choosing yourself isn't selfish when the alternative is letting others destroy your future. Ruby starts MIT next month, and the foundation just approved funding for 47 students this cycle. We built something beautiful from something ugly. You can too. Your dreams matter. Your light matters. And anyone who tells you otherwise, even if they share your blood, doesn't deserve a place in your story. Light your candle, burn bright. The world needs what you have to offer. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to let anyone dim their light. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so bright that those who tried to break you have to squint when they look your way.